AEW's history is awash with claret. Too much, many feel. The promotion has calmed down somewhat. Last year, in an object-defeating exercise, Mox bled so often that he became a meme. The audience had become desensitized to violence. Even in 2023 though, when that audience has seen everything, AEW is still capable of conjuring that visceral feeling of sickening violence so compelling that you can and cannot stomach it at the exact same time. So I am Gareth here from What Culture Wrestling, and here are those violent and bloody AEW matches that made us sick. Number 10, Blackpool Combat Club vs Best Friends, Eddie Kingston and Penta El Zero Miedo, all in London. Stadium Stampede 3 was not as chaotic nor as epic as the first Anarchy in the Arena match, nor was it as spectacular as the second, but it was probably the nastiest crowd brawl of the three. In an iconic visual, one that lovingly toyed with the contrast of Wembley's uber-mainstream backdrop, Penta planted skewers in Jon Moxley's head. The reaction when Mox tapped the skewers with his finger, allowing them to bloom, was incredible. A huge swell of awe-inspired disgust reverberated around a gigantic monolith of a packed stadium. Before the chaos of the finishing sequence, the key sequence relied on the annihilation of Trent. In order to draw Sue into the save, Trent had to get wrecked. And get wrecked he did. When Mox swiped at his legs, after Trent collided with a suspended ladder skull first with the quickness of a light switch, the subsequent beatdown was so cruel and relentless that Mox, too good for his own good, was received as a true heel for the very first time. Number 9, The Elite vs Blackpool Combat Club, Double or Nothing 2023. Again, Anarchy in the Arena 2, while outstanding, was not as magic as the first ultra-chaotic match. Much as the reunion of Kenny Omega and Hangman Page was euphoric to those who fell in love with AEW in its first year, nothing could touch the iconic visual of Eddie Kingston doused in blood, shuffling to the ring with a gas can. That sequence was something beyond perfect. The second match, however, was quite literally a blast. Matt Jackson working a secret explosion spot with a bomb-laced superkick to Jon Moxley's face was such an inspired idea. Built around the Elite slowly coming together again with roof-raising tandem offense, prior to the finish, which proved that the Blackpool Combat Club, by relying on Takeshita, could not match a united Elite, Matt Jackson built on his shoe law. It was removed from his foot, and in an exceptional gross-out moment, that foot was planted into thumbtacks. This induced a revolted shudder. Everybody has stepped on a plug, and everybody felt his pain vicariously. Number 8, Best Friends vs Santana and Ortiz, Dynamite 2020. Much latitude was extended to the closed-set Daily's Place era of AEW Dynamite. It wasn't the same at all, but people wanted it to be okay. In a weird sort of way, it worked. There was no alternative, which helped. Everybody was stuck, and to his immense credit, Austin Gunn was an incredibly convincing superfan plant. His energy at ringside was, in a not insignificant way, as important to AEW as some star signings were. And the wrestlers as Plant's gimmick was never more convincing than during the first parking lot fight between Best Friends and Santana and Ortiz. You could believe they were losing their collective minds because you were too. The layout and the degree of violence was astonishing. It was a masterpiece, the absolute pinnacle of pandemic wrestling. It was a frenzied, disgusting brawl, one that deftly incorporated wrestling sequences without ever feeling even remotely contrived. The hybrid was seamless. Using the bumper of a pickup truck as a platform for a tornado DDT was inspired. Every splatter into glass looked and sounded utterly vile. A triumph, an incredibly painful triumph. Number 7, Kenny Omega vs Jon Moxley, Dynamite 2023. In an awesome spot that looked even more deranged and committed for it going awry, Kenny Omega attempted to smash Jon Moxley out of a cage with a V-trigger. He, however, did not legislate for AEW's very weird cage. Already unreasonably tall, there is a thin, albeit solid, steel bar a quarter of the way up each wall. Why? Who the hell knows? But when the gimmicked bit of mesh blew open, Omega did not fly out of the ring and onto the floor. He instead landed taint first on said bar. This was one of the most wince-inducing spots in AEW history. Compounding that, the rest of the match was also phenomenally violent, since Omega and Mox have told a long-term story of their killing one another, and in one particularly sickening moment, Omega placed a chain wrapped in barbed wire over Mox's back. When he performed a double foot stomp, the force of the strike caused the wire to drag and scrape across Mox's back. Horrific! Number 6, Chris Jericho vs Nick Gage, Fight for the Fallen 2021. For a wrestler who is supposed to be an artless deathmatch merchant, Nick Gage is actually pretty great. Even if he wasn't, he exudes such badass presence that it wouldn't matter. Gage is a wrestler better experienced than analyzed, but even then he knows what he's doing. He knows how to evoke a deep, visceral response from the audience. Case in point, the pizza cutter. People hate this, people are disgusted by this. People, when they see it, want this sick filth banned. It is a weapon easy to work that is only visually horrifying, and people act like it will turn anybody's head into Abdullah the Butcher's overnight after one application. This is obviously not the case, but the pizza cutter works on a different level to, say, a chair or table. You've used a pizza cutter, you can feel the fear, since it is likely you've come close to slicing off the tip of your finger when hacking up some frozen monstrosity with a breadstick masquerading as a crust. The match was also sickening as a result of its liberal, disgusting, and exhilarating use of glass. Number 5, Thunder Rosa vs Dr. Britt Baker, St. Patrick's Day Slam 2021. One of the best matches in AEW history. Thunder Rosa vs Dr. Britt Baker was absolutely shocking. A women's main event on Dynamite? Yes, but beyond that, the extent of the violence was unsettling. It didn't lack for spectacular set pieces, but it was a match better for its tone and sense of struggle. One sequence in particular churned the gut though. More so than a brutal collision into a ladder, the sort of thing that adrenaline could override in the moment. Watching Rosa tear her own back up in thumbtacks to reverse the lockjaw into a pin attempt was shudder-inducing. This spot put over her sheer will to win in a match that can often just act as an excuse to perform cool spots. Number 4, Cody vs Dustin Rhodes, Double or Nothing 2019. Cody vs Dustin Rhodes was a seminal match. There are few things better than watching something become unforgettable in real time. The two brothers locked the audience into a spell. They captured so many feelings, panic, hope, despair, even laughter, in an ultra-dramatic tale of a cocky younger brother getting a literal spanking off his heroic but doomed sibling. The sickening elements, for once, had nothing to do with rampant bloodlust. Quite the opposite. Fans were sick to their stomachs watching on, nervous at Dustin's jelly-legged, blood-soaked plight. He lost a great deal of blood, but Dustin sold his end to perfection using the dark arts. Every tiny movement held enormous meaning, even as he lifted his shoulder off the mat when trapped in the figure 4. The fans erupted, relieved that he was not actually dead. This was a pure extraction of drama. The very simplest things mattered to a profound degree. Number 3, The Elite vs Blackpool Combat Club, AEW Blood and Guts 2023. As with every modern War Games match, The Elite vs Blackpool Combat Club was overlong and baggy and undermined by too many ideas. That the big blow-off to a feud that never felt all that urgent and personal to begin with almost existed to set up the main event of a Ring of Honor pay-per-view didn't help the lack of purpose. But AEW promised and delivered blood and guts. Jon Moxley looked like he had been mutilated with multiple sharp objects, and that's because he had. But the visual was more consistent with a gore-fest horror flick than even an ultra-violent plunder brawl. Again, the match at times felt like an excuse to do a spot fest with weapons, although the way in which it was all sequenced was deeply impressive. In the best spot, Kenny Omega took a Mox John Woo dropkick into a screwdriver tip board. From his mad scramble, he looked as though he'd shredded his flesh for real. Number 2, Kenny Omega vs Joey Janela, Dark 2019. Kenny Omega thinks more deeply about his craft than any other wrestler, and sometimes the most inspired ideas are very, very simple. And then of all things, an episode of Dark, Omega took a bump on the underside of a table. The visual and noise of his upper body colliding with the flat metal legs was grotesque. Now, if you think about it, the surface area aspect notwithstanding, this wasn't all too dissimilar to a wrestler taking a chair over the back, which tends to happen on every single episode of mainstream US television wrestling. But it was so novel that it looked and somehow felt more painful than it perhaps was in reality. The match wasn't especially deep nor intricate, a simple back and forth duel designed for the Omega character to train himself in Jon Moxley's specialist genre. This was still notable for the sheer "that must have absolutely sucked to take" factor. Built around executing spots on narrow, blunt objects, Omega and Janela might as well have taken turns bumping on a roadside curb for 26 minutes. Gross and a bit wasteful, to be honest, since it should have happened on Dynamite, but intoxicating all the same. Number 1, Kenny Omega vs Jon Moxley, AEW Full Gear 2019. This match was so sickening that Dave Meltzer momentarily turned into Gandhi. He despised how bloody and violent it was, rating it just 4.5 stars. Yep, that'll show him, Dave. Complaints were made to the local athletic commission. It's almost quaint how naively the match was received, which isn't to say it wasn't incredibly dangerous or unsettling. It's not as if taking a bump on a mousetrap board looked like a walk on crunchy leaves on a chilly autumnal day. Still, the magic was in the work. Real flesh-tearing barbed wire was used early. The barbed wire used on the spiderweb contraption on which Omega bumped was heavily gimmick though. Cute in places, it was horrendously awesome in others. A long fight so grueling that only something awful could decide it. Well, something awful did. Omega recalled with horror on the Wrestling Observer Radio the bump he took on the exposed wooden boards when missing a Phoenix splash. This collision was so sickening that it was as if he'd been thrown 10 stories to the ground. And that's our list. Know of any other violent and bloody AEW matches that made fans sick? Well, go and throw them in the comment section down below, and don't forget to like, share, and click on that subscribe button while you're down there. And if you like this sort of violent stuff, then head on over to whatculture.com and find some more fantastic articles just like the one this video you're watching right now is based on. I've been Gareth from What Culture Wrestling. Cheers for watching this video today, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Bye bye!